Welcome to my channel, Midsummer Myths, where you find stories like no other, packed with twists, drama, and unbelievable moments you won't forget. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, painting the lake in fiery oranges and deep purples. My lake cabin, a quiet retreat from the chaos of daily life, had always been my sanctuary. I was there to meet a high-profile guest, someone who carried immense authority and influence, the State Attorney General, who was visiting to discuss a legal matter related to recent community disputes. Little did I know, this meeting would collide head-on with the boldest act of entitlement I had ever seen. Out of nowhere, the door burst open. HOA Karen, infamous for policing every inch of the neighborhood, stormed in without permission, her face twisted in a mix of anger and self-righteousness, as if she owned the entire lake. She came armed with complaints, threats, and an assumption that she could intimidate anyone. Her audacity was almost cinematic, and she had no idea that I was no ordinary resident, and that the person seated in the living room was one of the state's most powerful legal authorities. Karen's voice echoed through the cabin, sharp and commanding, demanding explanations for what she considered violations. She assumed I would panic, that I would comply immediately, that she would assert dominance like she had countless times before. But the room held an unexpected power balance. The Attorney General, calm but commanding, didn't flinch. His eyes pierced hers, silently communicating that entitlement and arrogance were about to meet consequences they weren't prepared for. I watched as Karen realized, too late, that she had walked into a situation far beyond her control. Her words stumbled. The certainty in her step wavered. The AG remained composed, every motion deliberate, a living symbol of authority and justice. The tension was palpable. This was more than a confrontation. It was a test of courage, composure, and wit. As Karen fumbled for her next move, I knew that what happened next would be unforgettable. Witnessing her arrogance collide with real power was about to escalate in ways no one in the neighborhood would ever forget. Cameras might have been absent, but every moment was etched in the room with electric intensity. The scene was set for a clash that would leave lasting consequences, not just for Karen, but for the community and for me. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. Karen tried to assert authority, but the Attorney General's presence was magnetic, a force of law and discipline that made her usual tactics crumble. She waved documents, yelled about codes and fines, and attempted to lecture me on proper conduct, but each word seemed smaller and weaker as it bounced off. The composure of the man in the chair, I could see the panic in her eyes. She had barged in thinking she had the upper hand, but suddenly the scales of power shifted completely. Every gesture, every syllable of Karen's aggressive rant was met with the calm, unwavering authority of someone who could undo her petty reign with a single directive. The room felt like a courtroom without walls. Tension, authority, and impending judgment hung in the air. Karen tried intimidation, leaning over me as if sheer volume could compel compliance. But the AG spoke, a single, measured sentence, slicing through the chaos like a scalpel. The words were precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Karen froze, realizing that she had overstepped in every imaginable way. Her carefully rehearsed threats evaporated into thin air, replaced with the dread of consequences she had never considered. As the confrontation escalated, I stayed calm, observing how entitlement reacts when confronted by law and authority. Karen's usual tricks, yelling, threatening, wielding HOA letters like weapons, were useless. Every attempt to dominate the room was countered effortlessly, leaving her flustered, cornered, and exposed. Witnessing her unravel was almost surreal. She was a storm meeting an unmovable wall, and just when it seemed Karen might retreat, she lunged toward documents on the table, trying to seize evidence, unaware that the AG had already anticipated her move. In a swift, controlled motion, he positioned himself strategically, ensuring no escalation could occur without accountability. Karen's shock was palpable. This was not just authority, this was mastery. And as she stepped back, the realization hit her: she had no power here. Not now, not ever, in this room. Karen's bluster turned to desperation. She stomped, waved her hands, and tried one last intimidation tactic, threatening fines, penalties, and even legal action. But her threats were hollow. In the room, the balance of power had shifted entirely. I could see the moment she understood that her entitlement, which had terrorized neighbors for months, was meaningless here. The Attorney General, calmly yet firmly, outlined the consequences of her illegal entry. Each statement he made was deliberate, fact-based, and unmistakably authoritative. He explained how HOA overreach could be legally challenged, how any attempts at intimidation were considered harassment, and how law enforcement could intervene if necessary. Karen's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Incapable of formulating a coherent response, I leaned back, observing. My goal wasn't just to witness her humiliation, it was to let the law speak for itself. Karen had assumed that fear and aggression could manipulate anyone. But standing in the room was someone whose very presence communicated that entitlement met consequence. Each word from the AG reverberated through the cabin, shaking the foundations of Karen's carefully constructed world of control. Her panic turned to frantic attempts at justification. She scrambled, papers flying, voice cracking, clearly aware that she had stepped far outside acceptable boundaries. The AG, unfazed, maintained calm dominance, signaling that Karen's actions were entirely her own undoing. Every movement she made highlighted how completely powerless she had become by the end of this section. Karen realized she wasn't just in trouble, she had exposed herself, her overreach, and her arrogance to the highest level of authority. And the moment she understood that, a subtle, thrilling tension filled the air. The payoff for her actions was imminent. The aftermath was instant and irreversible. Karen's intrusion was now documented, her threats neutralized, and her overconfidence shattered. The Attorney General calmly detailed the steps that could be taken if HOA intimidation continued: legal protections, injunctions, and potential fines for harassment. Karen, still trying to maintain a shred of dignity, realized her reputation in the community was crumbling. I watched, a mixture of satisfaction and relief, as justice unfolded naturally. Karen had assumed dominance, but she had walked straight into accountability. The AG's presence had transformed what could have been a stressful confrontation into a controlled lesson in law, consequence, and authority. News of the incident spread quickly. Neighbors, initially sympathetic to Karen, began questioning her methods. Rumors circulated about the dramatic confrontation, and the story became a cautionary tale about entitlement meeting real-world consequences. For the first time, reputation was vulnerable, her arrogance publicly exposed, and yet the true satisfaction came quietly from observing justice, accountability, and moral authority in motion. Karen had not only failed to intimidate me, she had inadvertently demonstrated the power of law, preparation, and courage. The lake cabin, once a personal retreat, had become a stage for a lesson that would resonate throughout the community. Weeks later, the HOA still buzzed with whispers about the confrontation. Karen, now wary, avoided my cabin entirely. Community members spoke openly about boundaries and overreach, emboldened by the story of how a simple act of intrusion had led to her downfall. The irony was undeniable. Karen had believed her authority could intimidate anyone. Instead, she had walked into a room where law, influence, and composure entirely overshadowed her entitlement. The Attorney General's involvement transformed a personal annoyance into a public reckoning, proving that arrogance meets its match when confronted by preparation and courage. I reflected quietly, knowing that, while the drama had ended, the lesson would linger, not just for Karen, but for anyone who assumed entitlement could replace accountability. Her bold intrusion had backfired spectacularly, leaving her exposed, humbled, and a cautionary tale for the neighborhood. How did you like this story? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories from Midsummer Myths.